Scary telling.
I always knew my Aunt Martha died before I was born, but I never thought much about it. That is until I saw her standing in the upstairs window of the house across the street. I rubbed my eyes, thinking it was a trick of the light or my imagination, but when I looked again, she was still there. It was a strange feeling, seeing someone who had been dead for years standing there, watching me. I couldn't look away, and I knew that I had to investigate. I broke into the neighbor's house, heart pounding, and climbed the stairs to the room where I saw her. But the room was empty, and there was no sign of Aunt Martha. I searched the whole house, but she was nowhere to be found. As I left the house, I looked up at my own window, and there she was, Aunt Martha, looking down at me. I couldn't believe it. How was it possible that she was in two places at once? Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. I would see Aunt Martha in different places around town, always staring at me. At night, I could hear her whispering my name, and I felt like she was watching me even when I couldn't see her. I became obsessed with finding out what was going on, and I started to research everything I could about my Aunt Martha. I discovered that she had a twin sister who died when they were both young, and that my aunt had always felt a deep connection to her. One night, I had a vivid dream where I was standing in front of Aunt Martha's grave, and her twin sister appeared next to her, reaching out to me. When I woke up, I knew what I had to do. I went to the cemetery and found my Aunt Martha's grave. I stood there, staring at her name, and then I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I turned around, and there she was, standing right next to me. But she wasn't alone. Her twin sister was there too, and they were holding hands. They looked at me, and I could feel the weight of their sorrow and regret. They told me that they had been trying to reach me, to warn me about something. They said that there was a dark force that was after me, something that had been waiting for years to claim me. They explained that they had been watching over me, protecting me from this force, but that I had to be careful. They warned me that it was getting stronger, and that soon it would come for me. I knew then that I had to be vigilant, to watch for signs of this force and to do whatever I could to protect myself. I left the cemetery feeling both relieved and scared, knowing that I had to face whatever was coming my way. And now, every time I see Aunt Martha or her twin sister, I know that they are watching over me, guiding me, and protecting me from the unknown. I work the graveyard shift at the 24-hour on-campus library. It's usually quiet and peaceful, except for the occasional footsteps of students rushing to finish their assignments before the deadline. One night, while tidying up the shelves, I stumbled upon a dusty, leather-bound book hidden among the old tomes. As I opened it, I realized it was a handwritten journal, started almost 3 decades ago, with each page meticulously detailing the accidents and tragedies that have happened at the school since then. I was engrossed in the journal, reading about the strange occurrences that have taken place on campus, when I noticed the latest entry: a girl had fallen off the roof of the building I was in. I shuddered at the thought of the poor girl's tragic end, but something about the entry struck me as odd. It read accident. That was it. Just one word to describe the terrible fate of the girl. The following night, as I was going through the journal again, I noticed a familiar figure sitting in the reading corner, a beloved professor who had been teaching at the school for over a decade. I watched him as he scribbled something in a notebook, looking up at the shelves every so often as if making sure no one was watching him. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling that was creeping up on me, but I couldn't help feeling like something was off. A few days later, I found out that the girl's death had been ruled an accident. But the more I thought about it, the more I began to question whether it was really an accident. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than what was being reported. And then, I remembered the journal. I went back to the library that night, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to find out what was going on. As I made my way to the section where I found the journal, I saw the same professor sitting at the same reading corner. He looked up at me as I walked past him, but said nothing. I found the journal and started flipping through the pages, trying to find something that would explain the girl's death. And that's when I saw a new entry in the professor's handwriting. It read she saw too much. Had to take care of her. I felt my blood run cold as I realized what that meant. The professor had something to do with the girl's death. And now, he knew I had seen the journal. I turned around to confront him, but he was gone. As I made my way back to the front desk, I heard a faint whisper in my ear. It was the professor's voice, cold and menacing. You should have minded your own business. I turned around, but no one was there. From that day on, I never went back to the library. But even now, years later, I still see the professor's face in my nightmares, his cold eyes and twisted smile haunting me. And I can't help but wonder what other dark secrets does the campus library hold. I couldn't believe my luck when I found the winning lottery ticket pinned to a tree in the park. I had never won anything in my life, and the thought of having millions of dollars at my fingertips was overwhelming. But that excitement soon turned into fear as strange things began to happen. The first time I spent some of the money, I was at the grocery store and a man suddenly collapsed in front of me. I called an ambulance, but he didn't make it. The second time, I donated some of the money to a charity and the building caught on fire the next day. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I started to research the history of the lottery ticket, hoping to find some answers. That's when I discovered that it was sold at a gas station near an abandoned church that was rumored to be cursed. People who went inside never came out the same, and strange symbols were carved into the walls. I went back to the park to find the tree where I found the ticket, but it was gone. In its place stood a large stone monument covered in the same symbols as the cursed church. I felt a cold breeze blow through me as I realized that the curse had latched onto me and was slowly taking over my life. I became paranoid, unable to trust anyone or anything. I stopped spending the money, but the bad luck continued to follow me. I knew I had to go back to the cursed church to try and break the curse, but I was terrified. One night, I mustered up the courage to go inside. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, and I could hear whispers in the dark. I followed them to a room where a group of people were performing a ritual, using my lottery ticket as the centerpiece. I tried to run, but they caught me and tied me to the altar. They chanted in an unknown language as the symbols on the walls began to glow. Suddenly, everything went quiet, and I felt a presence enter the room. It was something ancient and evil, and I knew I was in grave danger. But then, the symbols on the lottery ticket began to glow too, and a bright light filled the room. The evil presence vanished, and the curse was broken. I was free. I left the church and never looked back, leaving the cursed lottery ticket behind. I learned a valuable lesson that day. Sometimes, the things we want most can come with a terrible price. And the true value of life cannot be measured in money. I had never seen a game like this before. It was advertised as the most advanced and revolutionary game on the market, and I was lucky enough to be one of the first to download it. It was called Quest of the Ancients, and it promised to take me on a journey of epic proportions. I gathered my friends, all 11 years old like me, and we settled in for a long night of gaming. We created our characters, chose our weapons, and dove headfirst into the adventure. But something strange began to happen as we played. The game felt too real, as if we were actually there in the world we were exploring. We could feel the heat of the sun on our skin, the weight of our weapons in our hands. And when we encountered enemies, we could feel their blows as if they were real. The night passed in a blur, and when we finally looked up from the screen, the sun was rising. We were exhausted, but we had accomplished so much in the game. We were thrilled to see what else it had in store for us. But when we returned to school, we found that our actions in the game had been inflicted on our classmates. The school was in chaos, with students fighting each other with weapons we had used in the game. We were horrified and confused. How could this be happening? We suspected our strict teacher, Miss Thompson, to be behind it all. She had always been cold and distant, and we had never trusted her. We knew we had to figure out how to undo her spell and reverse the damage we had done. But how? We couldn't fight her in the real world, and we didn't know how to fight her in the game. That's when we discovered a strange glitch in the game. If we could reach a hidden level, we could enter a code that would allow us to break the spell. We worked tirelessly to reach the hidden level, fighting through hordes of enemies and solving puzzles. We finally made it, and we entered the code just as Miss Thompson burst into the classroom. She laughed maniacally as she revealed herself to be a powerful witch. She had used our love of the game to trap us in her spell and turn us into her pawns. But as soon as we entered the code, the spell was broken. The chaos in the school disappeared, and everything returned to normal. Miss Thompson disappeared, never to be seen again. We learned a valuable lesson that day. The world of gaming can be a powerful and dangerous place, and we must be careful of who we trust. But we also learned that we are stronger together than apart, and that even the toughest challenges can be overcome with the power of friendship. I had always been fascinated by zombies. As a child, I would have nightmares about a pandemic that would sweep the world, turning everyone into brain-hungry monsters. But instead of cowering in fear, I decided to do something about it. I dedicated my life to preparing an antidote, waiting for the outbreak so I could develop a cure. I spent countless hours in my basement laboratory, experimenting with different chemicals and testing their effects on animals. I read every book and article I could find on infectious diseases and viruses. I became obsessed with finding a cure, convinced that one day the world would need it. But my dedication came at a cost. The scientific community shunned me for my fringe beliefs. They mocked me and called me a mad scientist, warning others to stay away from me. Despite the ridicule, I never gave up. I continued my research, always one step ahead of the game. And when the first signs of sickness appeared in my loved ones, I knew I had to act fast. I kidnapped them and took them to my underground research facility, a maze of sterile rooms and lab equipment. I pushed myself to my limits, testing different combinations of chemicals and performing risky procedures. But as I worked, I began to lose sight of the humanity of those I was trying to save. I saw them as mere test subjects, objects to be experimented on rather than people to be loved and cared for. I made dire choices, ones that still haunt me to this day. I pushed the boundaries of science and ethics, all in the name of finding the cure. And then, finally, it happened. I discovered the antidote, the one thing that could save the human race from the zombie pandemic. But as I administered the cure to my loved ones, I realized that I had become a monster myself. I had sacrificed everything in my quest to save the world, and in doing so, I had lost my own humanity. The cure worked, but at a terrible cost. My loved ones were saved, but they looked at me with fear and mistrust. They knew what I had done to save them, and they couldn't forgive me for it. I am now a pariah, a man without a country. I am hailed as a hero by some, and reviled as a monster by others. But deep down, I know the truth. I know that I lost something important in my quest to save the world. The zombie pandemic never came to pass, but I realize now that the real monsters were always inside of us. The cure may have saved us from the zombies, but it could never save us from ourselves.